I can't actually believe I ever thought I was straight now. Hey folks, it's Finn. Welcome back folks, lovely to see you. So in today's video we're going to be talking about figuring out your sexuality. So figuring out your sexuality and who you're attracted to can take some time to work out. It can often be confusing for people, and it's even more confusing often when you're also transgender, as I am. So in today's video I'm going to share my story about how I figured out my sexuality. I'm going to talk a bit about why I think it was so confusing for me and why it took so long. I'm also going to link you to videos through the process of me working it out, so you can have a look at those as well, because it might be helpful to those who are also trying to figure themselves out. But first, a bit of housekeeping before we begin. For anyone who is new around here, my name is Finn and I share my life in recovery as a transgender gay man. So here you can expect to see lots of really honest, inspiring content. So don't forget to go ahead and subscribe, and when you do, also hit that notification bell, and then you'll be notified of all of the regular Finstalments. So when it comes to sexuality and sexual attraction, it has quite literally taken me my entire life to work it out. I am now 46 years of age, and finally I know who I am and who I'm attracted to. As long as we figure it out at some point, it's okay. Progress, not perfection. So let's take you right back down memory lane, where this all began. In my younger years, I was attracted to men. Absolutely 100% attracted to men. I would feel sexually attracted, emotionally attracted, mentally attracted. It was all about men. But what I kept experiencing was sexual issues with men. So I would be attracted, I'd start a relationship. In the early days of the relationship, it would be okay, but then I'd just start going off sex, because sex with men just felt really uncomfortable and wrong in some way, in ways I couldn't really ever put into words. It just felt icky. I was really embarrassed about how I felt and really confused, because I was really genuinely attracted, but then it would all go wrong as soon as we got intimate, so I didn't know what was going on. And there was one kind partner who really wanted to help me work this out, and he asked me to explain how I felt. And so I explained to him that whenever I had sex, I felt sick. Needless to say, we split up, because no partner needs to be told that you having sex with them makes you feel sick. I kept on dating men. I would enter a relationship, things would be okay in the beginning, then sooner or later it would all break down. And the breakdowns would always be about sex and intimacy. Our arguments with men I was dating were always around sex. Usually the reason we broke up was because of sex. Now at the time, I was in my late teens, early 20s, and working in the care profession. I used to work as a care assistant, and there are huge amounts of LGBT people in the caring profession. At least there was in Eastbourne, where I was growing up. And I had an experience which changed things for me in ways I didn't actually figure out completely until recently. One day, working in a nursing home and sat in our coffee room for break, a person walked through the back door, said hello to everybody and carried on walking, and this person was mesmerising. There was just something about them that I was really drawn to. And when this person had left the room, I said to somebody else, "Who's that bloke?" It wasn't a bloke. This person, who for the purpose of confidentiality we shall call Andy, was actually a lesbian, a very proud butch lesbian, and she looked like a man. Her voice was male, her body looked very male, she had these gloriously hairy legs, and I was fascinated by her and would spend most of my days just following her around everywhere in the nursing home. She loved the fact that I was doing this, and we flirted lots together, and nothing ever came of it, and I was gutted about that. But what it did lead me to conclude was that I was a lesbian. Because what else would make sense? The more I discovered about lesbian women, the more I thought that explained me, because I related to so many of their stories. So many of them spoke about not feeling comfortable with men, So many of them were identifying in quite masculine ways, and I was very much the tomboy growing up, much preferred to be kind of one of the guys, and so being a lesbian seemed to explain what had been going on for me. It explained why I had this issue with sex with men, and it explained why I much more preferred to be a tomboy. And now, of course, I do realise that this is a very broad stereotype of lesbians that isn't right, but it suited me at the time to live up to that expectation, to live up to that stereotype. Because once I decided that that's what I was, that I was a lesbian, and I came out as a lesbian, I was treated like one of the guys. I could then wear whatever I wanted. I was really into my shirts and ties. And as a lesbian, I wasn't judged for that like I had been previously as a straight woman. It was kind of the expected thing that as a lesbian I was going to act very manly. And so it did two things. It gave me this kind of ability to be more comfortable in myself. And dating women was more comfortable. I understand a little bit more about this now, but it allowed me to play more of a male role. And so my relationships with women were much better, but they weren't perfect. The trouble was, although being intimate with women was easier than being intimate with men, it still wasn't quite right in ways I, again, still couldn't explain. And by this point, I'd pretty much decided that it was just me, that I was broken in some way that I didn't understand, that meant sex just didn't work for me. But then, of course, a new realisation came to light. So those of you who follow my journey on here will know that I discovered myself to be transgender in 2010, and that was on the back of getting clean and sober. I'd unfortunately turned to drink and drugs as a way of managing this feeling of ill-ease I'd had in myself all my life. But then when I got clean and sober, it became apparent that my issues were that I was transgender. I'll link up here to a video which explains how I came out as trans. It is quite an old video, so you'll get to see baby Finn. I will update that at some point. But in a nutshell, everything suddenly made sense when I realised I was trans, because it made sense that being with men had felt uncomfortable, because actually I was a man and they were relating to me as a female. It also made sense why being with women hadn't felt quite right, because although I played more of a male role, they were still relating to me as female. It also explained why I enjoyed so much being treated as a man and being mistaken as a man, because I used to love, before I transitioned, being mistaken as a man. And now that seems so obvious, because what woman likes to be mistaken as a man? It also made sense as to why I'd found that Andy so fascinating in the nursing home, because I loved how androgynous she looked. I loved the fact that she looked like a man, and I could see now that actually that's what I wanted for myself. So coming out as trans, suddenly everything made sense. My sexuality made sense, my gender presentation made sense. Everything made sense because I was a man. I was a straight man. Or so I thought. So here was I, suddenly knowing who I was, everything made sense, and then the partner that I was dating at the time, who we'd both started out as two women in a relationship, that partner then decided they were going to transition as well. And that meant that I would then be having a male partner, and by default I would be gay. Slight spanner in the works. Now, many of you also followed my very honest sharing around that time, where I was very honest that I didn't want to be gay. At the time, I put that down to not wanting to be different again. I'd spent half my life as a lesbian and having dyke shouted at me in the street, having to not be able to hold my partner's hand without being looked at or said something to, and I'd enjoyed this brief period of time as a straight man with a girlfriend and being kind of normal, for want of a better word. And I didn't want that to end. I didn't want to go back to people staring at me, calling me names, to not be able to hold my partner's hand in the street. And for that reason, I was quite resistant to my ex coming out as trans and becoming male. But we did start to work through it all, but then we split up anyway. So I thought, fantastic, now I'm single, I can go back to being a straight man and find myself a lovely girlfriend. In my new single life, I kept seeing men and finding them attractive and feeling rather confused about that. I was really resistant to noticing this attraction to men, and I know now that a lot of my thoughts and my feelings were internalised homophobia and internalised transphobia. When we receive those messages all the time that being gay is less than, that being gay isn't acceptable, that straight should be the norm, it's almost impossible for that not to get internalised. And I know now that that is what had happened to me. I was also incredibly heavily invested in the story I told myself. I am this person that likes to spend a lot of time figuring myself out and understanding myself. And I'd made sense of myself. I'd made sense of myself as a straight man. Because as far as I was concerned, that explained all of my issues with men, it explained all of my issues with women, it explained half of my reason for being trans. And suddenly to think I might not be straight just confused everything. And I didn't know what to do with that at first. But I've learned always to face aspects of myself and to trust that if I pay attention to something, even if it's a ball of confusion, by paying attention to it, it will eventually unravel. So I just got on with my single life in Devon, and it was in doing that that actually things started to shift. I'll come back to this a little bit later in the video, but just to say that I can see now looking back that what was happening for me was that I wasn't yet 100% confident in my maleness. And so I was so easily knocked by other people's views of me. I was knocked by this really poor stereotype that feminises gay men, and I was terrified of being feminised again. I was also really taking on board this idea that me being a gay trans man would make me not trans enough or not male enough, because in some way if I was still attracted to men, that must mean I was somehow still female. So that single time in Devon, what I really focused on was just being confident about me. It was incredible to be single for the first time in many years and be okay to be single. And I spent a great deal of time single. And it's the best investment I ever made, because it gave me the chance to be my own man and to just be seen as me. And those who follow me will remember that I did my stealth experiment, not a word I usually use, but I basically decided not to disclose I was transgender. That began to feel a little bit uncomfortable in the rooms of AA because I was censoring myself, so I came out again in AA in Devon as a trans man. I will link you to a video about that as well. But in that coming out and it being a complete non-issue, my confidence in my maleness just shot up, because I realised that all I'm seen as is what's here in front of people's faces, a man. And nothing was going to shake that. I was owning my maleness. Now, with this newfound confidence in myself, something else started to happen. As you can see, I am very flamboyant. If you see back to my earlier videos, I was not quite as much. I used to be very kind of like stoic and kind of I wouldn't move because I'd kind of wanted to be seen as male, and male to me meant very kind of stereotypical, monotone, kind of being very butch, and that's not me. But this part of me hadn't come out yet, and it started to come out in Devon. It had already been creeping out a bit, but in Devon I just let loose this new flamboyant personality. I started to be okay wearing pink again, because I'd always associated pink with females, with femininity, and didn't want anything to do with that. I would always wear very dark clothing, things with collars, never wear earrings, and then suddenly in being confident, I was wearing earrings, wearing pink, and being this very flamboyant person, and still feeling 100% male. I began to see that gender identity and gender expression are two very different correlated things. That I could be 100% male, wear makeup, earrings, dance around, and my gender identity wasn't changed because of that. This new confident Finn, as most of you will remember, then went off to have a huge, exciting summer of sexual exploration. I went to some cuddle parties, I had a time in a sauna, I even entered into a polyamorous threesome, and I'll link up to all of these adventures. And this just helped me to really become confident in myself as a man, in my sexuality, in my expression. I was set free. This was much needed playtime for me to explore expressing myself in various different ways with various different people, and just to really gain that confidence. And what that did was set the stage for the relationship I now have with Chris. If I hadn't had that time being confident in my masculinity and exploring my sexuality in very safe, consensual, negotiated ways with other people, I wouldn't have been ready to have this relationship with Chris. It's precisely because of the time I spent investing in becoming comfortable with myself that it was so easy to fall in love with Chris. And I'll link up to a video about how we met and how my coming out as trans went with him, but that was how I was then able to really embrace myself as a gay man. I pretty much knew I was, but Chris was my like, okay, am I definitely? And as soon as we met, all bets were off, and I was in no more doubt about my gayness. Looking back now at all of this, with the benefit of hindsight and understanding myself, I can see that I've always been gay. I've always been attracted to men. It makes sense that it didn't work because, of course, back then, before I transitioned, the men I met were men that were attracted to women, and they were relating to me as a woman. Whereas now, looking like the man I am, I'm attracting men who are attracted to men and see me and relate to me as male. So it makes perfect sense now, of course. I do define myself as gay, and that is because, although there's obviously some ability in me to be with any gender, it is men that really do it for me. It always has been. So for that reason, I do define myself as gay. And that is how I embraced my queerness. The topic of this video was sent in today by Ian Boom, who is a member of our Flock Club. Thank you so much, Ian, for that incredible question. I hope that's answered things for you. And if you want to have more of a role in the content I make suggestions, be part of our flock, and get lots of extra perks as well, I'll put a link up here as to how you can join our flock membership. I really hope that was helpful to anyone else who might be exploring their gender, their sexuality and their sexual orientation. If you have any comments or questions, please do let me know in the section below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my content, I'll link you to a playlist which you can click on here. And if you've got this far and you haven't already subscribed, you can do that here as well. Thanks for watching, folks. Take care of yourselves, keep on keeping on. See you next week.